11 to 18. Northern Ireland's longest-serving MP is expected at a court hearing tomorrow to establish if his case will be sent for trial. The 61-year-old's previously said he'll contest all counts against him, as has his wife, who's facing a separate allegation. Now, away from politics today, a student nurse described as an incredibly dangerous man who intended to kill as many people as possible has been found guilty of preparing terrorist acts. Mohammed Farouk was arrested in Leeds with a pressure cooker bomb at the hospital where he worked in January last year. Sheffield Crown Court heard today how an incredibly brave patient prevented utter devastation when he managed to talk him down. The 28-year-old self-radicalised Islamist terrorist had immersed himself in extremist Islamist ideology and went to the hospital to kill nurses and seek his own martyrdom. And just lastly, from the United States, Democrat Lloyd Doggett has become the first politician in Joe Biden's party to call now for him to step down as presidential nominee. There have been questions about the president's future in November's election following his poor performance in last week's TV debate against former President Donald Trump. It comes as Joe Biden's planning a meeting with Democratic governors tomorrow to reassure them that he is of sound mind and body. Those are the latest GB News headlines. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks, Polly. Welcome back. Right, let's get stuck into this postal vote story. So, the Royal Mail has been criticised for failing to deliver to some postal voters on time. The Telegraph has discovered that voters in more than 90 constituencies, including some cabinet ministers, have raised concerns about their ballot papers failing to arrive. It's also an issue for overseas voters. And it's a problem in Scotland, where postal votes have failed to arrive before the school summer holidays, which start earlier than in England and Wales. Have you been affected by this? That's the question I'm asking you this evening. If you have, do get in touch. Leave a comment for me at gbnews.com/yoursay with your views on that this evening. So if you've had a problem getting your postal vote, it's arrived late, you're worried about getting it back to your constituency office, then please do get in touch. We're going to be joined now by Vijay Rangarajan, who's the Chief Executive at the Electoral Commission. Mr Rangarajan, thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. How much of a problem is this, and how concerned is the Electoral Commission?
So what we know is that in some cases there have been some delays to postal votes, absolutely right. About 6.7 million people have now used the postal voting system. So the votes have been sent to them, they've signed them, they've voted, they've gone back through the Royal Mail system to election administrators, and they're going to be counted after 10 p.m. on Thursday night. So 6.7 million, it's a lot of people, and it's more than actually voted by post in the equivalent time at the 2019 general election. So mostly the system is working really well, and can I say thank you to election administrators who have had to do a big job running this poll immediately after the May poll. Clearly there have been some problems with some delays to some postal votes. Overall, we'll be looking at the entire system and trying to make sure that after this election we can improve the system. What we're seeing is a very large number of postal votes.
Yes, indeed. So you're saying that actually that is a large number, isn't it? 6.7 million having already put their cross by the relevant box and sent them off. Do we have any idea at all of how many numbers are affected by not having received their ballot papers when they should have already?
We think very few now haven't received their ballot papers. Royal Mail, as you say, have checked their system, have tried to get all of the ballot papers through. There have been a few issues with some printers, a few issues on delivery times for some, but everyone should have their ballot papers by now. It's possible some don't. So here's what people should do if they don't. If they haven't received a ballot paper in their postal vote, they should contact their local council and get a replacement pack. That will mean going and picking it up, I'm afraid, but they will show some ID for the election security, and they'll then be able to vote. But if you have got a ballot paper received today or even tomorrow, you can still use it to vote. You can vote early as you can, get it into a post box, and Royal Mail will then sweep up all the votes and make sure that by 10 o'clock on Thursday night, they're with the relevant people who start the counting process. So do still use it if you've got it.
OK, so use it if you've got it, even if you're posting it tomorrow?
Even if you're posting it tomorrow, you can, if you're not sure you trust that, still take it in. You can take it in yourself.
Take it physically
to the polling station on Thursday, or you can ask someone else to take it in to the polling station on Thursday. So there's many ways to make sure that your vote is counted.
When you say very small numbers you think have been affected, can you put any kind of figure on that? Are you talking about low thousands, tens of thousands? What does that mean, only a small amount of people?
We think many less than tens of thousands. We can't put a total figure on it at the moment. It's moving all the time. We'll come back to this as we do after every election and analyse how many votes didn't make it through the system or, for whatever reason, didn't count. The number is usually really small. I think voters should have a high degree of trust in the system and that their vote will, in fact, count. As I say, once we've got all the votes by the close of polling at 10 p.m. on Thursday, then the counting will start overnight, and we should see declarations early on Friday. Just one thing, can I just remind all your viewers, please, if you're going to the polling station, bring your voter ID.
Yes, OK, will do. I remember Boris Johnson got unstuck on that in the local elections recently, so thank you very much indeed, Mr Rangarajan. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's speak to Bruce Darrington, who's in the studio with me. You're the chair of the British Overseas Voters Forum. You've just heard that interview there with the Electoral Commission boss. He's playing it down somewhat. He says that only a small number of people have been affected. But, Bruce, I think you're telling a different story when it comes to expats who are still entitled to vote in British elections. They've been having problems with their postal votes.
Well, yes, indeed. I mean, Vijay did talk about the 200,000 or 300,000 votes that are going, the postal votes that are going overseas, and many of those have not arrived.
When you say many, Bruce, can you quantify that? So how many should be voting from overseas in any given national ballot? Well,
as a result of the change in the electoral law allowing more British people overseas to vote, we estimate it'll be around 450,000.
OK, significant amount there.
Significant amount of voters.
And how many do you think haven't received their ballot papers
Well,
yet?
let's say 2/3 of those are choosing to have a postal vote.
Yes.
And another third are choosing to have a rather inadequate proxy system,
right,
to somebody who will sort of turn up or vote for them on their behalf.
Yeah.
So let's say there's 200 to 300,000 people who are supposed to get their votes overseas. Now, we have many members all over the world, even in very developed countries like Japan. Today, many postal votes arrive today to our members in Japan. And
so how on earth are they going to send them back? That's not
absolutely impossible. It doesn't, even if you couried them back using DHL or whatever, it's not going to work. So we've said all along, pretty much every developed country or even less developed country in the world, they use their embassies and their consulates to organise the overseas vote.
Right.
It's very secure. You register with your embassy or consulate. They distribute the ballot papers. You send it back. They make sure through their fast post system that all the ballot papers reach the ballot box. Absolutely secure. Absolutely 100%. So that's very much what we said when this legislation was announced, that we really should have a secure and 100% effective.
Why don't we have that?
Well, I think that the government saw it as potentially costing money, or not really costing money, but a distraction on what the Foreign and Commonwealth Office do. So they just felt, no, let's stick with the postal voting system. But we will see very strong evidence. Probably that only half the postal votes will have arrived and come back. So just arriving is one thing, but of course, going back is another. And what I think people don't realise is that after COVID, the international postal system has sort of broken down. And for many countries, you don't receive mail from the UK for a month or, a month and a half or sometimes never.
Yes.
But I'm surprised with Japan, because Japan has a really efficient postal system, and yet people are only receiving their ballot papers today, and many have not received.
But has this historically always been a problem, or is this a 2024 problem and it's worse than it has been in previous elections?
Well, there are more people voting from overseas now, and so it's a more significant issue. And yes, I think as as we all know, the postal system isn't so well used anywhere in the world because of internet and so on. So it's a growing problem, and probably in 5 years' time it'll be even worse because we can't. The UK can't rely. It can do its part, but once the mail leaves our shores, it's in the hands of intermediaries and other postal systems. And it just takes so long.
I tell you what's troubling me about this, Bruce, I mean, and regardless of whether it affects domestic postal voters or those overseas, is that obviously our first-past-the-post system means that one vote matters. One vote is the difference between one side winning or another or another or another. And if we have closely contested marginal seats, which looks extremely likely, we're already talking, aren't we, about certain seats going neck and neck. If there's, say, a dozen votes in it, and there's evidence in that constituency that a load of postal votes haven't arrived, be it from Japan or the village next door, that's hugely problematic, and then will be something that the Electoral Commission will have to investigate. We could have results that aren't honest results because the postal votes haven't been counted.
Absolutely. It's absolutely bound to happen. And, just take the overseas voters where obviously the problem is much greater. Some constituencies have between 1,000 and 3,000 overseas registered voters. So, yes, that's going to be the majority in many seats.
All right, I think we're going to continue to talk about this probably towards the end of the week, Bruce, when the results of this become apparent. Thank you very much indeed for joining me in the studio.
Thank you too.
Coming up next, we're going to be discussing whether opticians can help to bring down NHS waiting lists. Don't go anywhere, I'll be back in 2.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m, followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain, followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
He fell into a coma. His family, of course, absolutely distraught. Because Turkey is outside the European Union, it therefore doesn't count under the Global Health Insurance Card scheme, which means that he is liable for these costs, and the family say that he's being held there for until they pay at least half the £41,000 that is owed.
One of our viewers here saying their premium, because they have health conditions, can be as much as £1,000. But if they're going to go overseas to, as you say, a non-EU country, they still should take it. That's the message here, isn't it? Don't take the risk.
Absolutely. Now, if you do have lots of pre-existing medical conditions, or you're an older person, my lovely mother-in-law is going to be 95 this week. She's still travelling, but only within Europe. And only because the cost of insurance is going to be many times the cost of the trip. And she just thinks, OK, well, I'll get emergency medical treatment free if I'm in the European Union and I've got that GHIC card. But beyond that, absolutely not. It's not worth the risk.
You have to have your card, do you, Simon, to get treatment within the EU? You should just apply for that online.
You should certainly apply for it online. Don't go to any of the scam sites that want to charge you money for it, because it's a free card. But actually, if you haven't, it's absolutely not a huge problem. Yes, you have to go through a bit of rigmarole, or at least your family do, to sort it out. But in general, if you go to a public hospital, they will treat you first and ask questions later in the European Union. And if you're a British resident, you should get it for free. Even if you forgot to get the GHIC card, they will sort it out eventually.
Britain's election channel. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to Vote 2024 with me, Camilla Tominey. This evening I've asked you, have you been affected by the postal voting scandal, the fiasco? And one viewer says 2 in 3 postal votes haven't arrived. In Enfield, already asked the council for a replacement. Sally says there are also issues about some people not receiving polling cards. I know you don't need them to vote, but they do tell you where to vote. They were not even printed for some in East Devon. And Ashwin said, we received our postal votes days ago. But to be fair, you probably should have received them weeks ago, as I did in leafy Hertfordshire. Mark says, it doesn't matter if only a small amount of people are affected. This is an electoral commissioned failure and will affect local battles for all parties. In 2024, how can this happen? Very good point. Well, we're going to discuss that in just a moment with my superstar political panel. But first, let's get into this story about opticians perhaps helping to bring down NHS waiting lists. So Labour wants to send patients to Specsavers or similar in a bid to cut NHS waiting lists. It wants private providers to carry out routine checks and scans to free up NHS specialists for more complex procedures. There are currently 613,000 patients on NHS waiting lists for eye care, 15,000 of whom have been waiting for more than a year. Well, to discuss this, I'm joined in the studio by Dr. Peter Carter, who's an independent health consultant and former chief executive of the Royal College of Nursing. Dr. Carter, lovely to see you, especially to see you. You're wearing glasses. I said to you earlier, I am, in real life, as blind as a bat and wear contact lenses. So thank goodness for specialists like you. Because I am so short-sighted, literally -10 in each eye, I go to a specialist optician just to make sure that my eyes are OK every 6 months because I'm prone to things like retinal detachments and all the rest of it. I'm wondering, I'm questioning the wisdom of this because are opticians at Specsavers, with the greatest respect to them, qualified enough to do some of the checks that people need on their eyes when it comes to conditions that could affect you, like macular degeneration or indeed eye cancers and things like that?
Look, it's very important that opticians don't act out of their area of competence. But I'm all in favour of this because we are in a hell of a mess.
Yeah.
Over 600,000 people, as you've already said, on the waiting list, 15,000 people waiting over a year, and at least 500 people a year are losing their sight because of the long waiting list. Now, if you can get early access to high street opticians, they can help to detect things far earlier than if you had to wait a year or even many, many months. So you could get stuck in some ideological straitjacket saying, no, everything's got to be done by the public sector.
Yeah.
But we are in this difficult situation. So I don't have a problem if West Streeting, if it becomes the Secretary of State for Health, can negotiate some good deals with Boots, Specsavers or whatever in order to get people early access to assessment. And it's at the assessment stage that most high street opticians can pick up that you've got a problem and then try and fast track them in for treatment. In the long term, by investing there, I actually think you'll save money because you will prevent longer term conditions developing, which currently is the case, I'm saddened to say.
And also, opticians now, to be fair, do have much more sophisticated equipment. So ordinarily, you'd be expecting, if you live in London, to go to Moorfields to get specialist eye care. I noticed in my own optician, they've got all sorts of gadgets and gizmos. They can look into the back of your eye. Is that also why this is a good idea? Because opticians are providing a much more comprehensive service than they used to.
Well, look, we're very quick to knock the UK on all sorts of things. But with a whole range of things, the training is up there with the very best worldwide. And the people that assess you in most high street opticians are highly trained, sophisticated people who can actually assess and diagnose and then get you signposted into the right treatment. So I think this is a very good move. I wish it wasn't the case, but we are where we are. And as I say, if 15,000 people are waiting for over a year, then that doesn't bode well for their long-term future.
And when you say that they could go blind in that time, what kind of conditions just can't be waited on? They have to be dealt with immediately.
Well, there's a whole range of conditions. You mentioned macular degenerative disease, there's glaucoma, and also people can pick up by using the diagnostic interventions, they can pick up that things are going wrong and get you into treatment.
And finally, Doctor, after a certain age, what would it be? I don't know, 60? How regularly should you be seeing an optician? Because a lot of these conditions do hit people in older age.
Yeah, look, I mean, a lot of people go for an annual checkup, and that's a very sensible thing to do. And I think that that's a good investment in time and also a very good investment in money.
OK, Dr Peter Carter, thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. Right, let's get stuck into the election campaign now. 48 hours or so to go until the polls close. Well, probably about 51 hours to be completely accurate about it. Goodness me, I mean, it's been quite the campaign so far. Let's bring my two guests into the conversation now. Conservative Cabinet Minister, or former Conservative Cabinet Minister, George Eustice, and former Labour MP, Stephen Pound, in a very natty suit. I see you've been doing your election dress shopping, Stephen, because you're going to be with us, both of you, on election night.
Are we?
Absolutely. Yes, you are, I think so. I think we're all going to be together in perfect harmony as the chips fall. Let's talk about the postal votes thing first of all, because the CEO of the Electoral Commission there is sort of playing it down and saying only a few thousand are affected. But if this was happening in your constituency at the time when you were running as MPs, you'd be worried about it, wouldn't you?
Oh, you would. I mean, because there will be dozens and dozens of seats in this election where every vote counts.
Yes.
And more important than that, people, they want to exercise their right to vote. It's actually people feel very, very angry if they've got a right to vote and the vote doesn't turn up. So no, it is quite serious, and I don't really understand how this came about, because we've done postal votes now for many, many years in this country. And I know
Royal Mail is blaming the government for calling a snap election and saying that they weren't prepared.
Well, snap elections have happened before, and, to be honest, an election could have happened at any time this year. There was a lot of that you wouldn't just wait and think, oh, well, we didn't think it was coming till October. They should have been ready for any moment for it to be called. I mean, at any moment there could have been a vote of no confidence or anything.
But here's an interesting thing. Even if we identified thousands of people who weren't able to vote, there's no mechanism under the Representation of the People Act for rerunning the election. We've had situations where polling stations have closed early, there's been power failure, there's been problems that have actually been caused, people can't get into the polling station, and in every one of those cases, whatever the result was at the time that happened, stood. So
is that right? I mean, I suppose there isn't much choice.
Well, no, I appreciate that, but what you'd think, logically, you would say, suppose you actually come up with base evidence that you've got 1,000 people didn't get their postal vote, and the party wins by less than 1,000 votes. You'd think that in common decency would say you rerun the election, but you can't. There's absolutely no mechanism under British electoral law for doing that.
Can I make a controversial suggestion that we just don't have postal votes? There isn't just a problem with them not arriving on time. There's also a problem that they feel in some families, votes can be manipulated and that people can influence others within the family to vote a certain way.
Very much so, but don't forget, the system's been tightened up immensely now. What used to happen, I used to just see them as the postal votes were taken out of the envelopes in the office. You see the same handwriting, the same name, in the same signature. Nowadays, you have to have your national insurance number, and there's a much more rigorous checking.
The single voter sort of registration was brought in to deal with that sort of abuse. So I think postal votes, it can work, because often you'll find that there are elderly people who can't get out to the polling station or are not sure that they'll be able to on the day, and for them it's a really important way to be able to
get a postal vote. I mean, up until I think it was as recently as about 92, you could still get a postal vote but a nurse or a doctor or a dentist, oddly enough, or an ophthalmologist had to sign a piece of paper saying that for physical reasons they couldn't. Or the other one was the armed forces. If you were serving overseas in the armed forces, you could then get a postal vote. So we've always had postal. What is different now is these massive numbers. It's like 40% of some constituencies.
I mean, it's amazing to think that 6.7 million people have already voted. So whatever Starmer, Sunak, Farage or anyone else does on the campaign trail for the next 24 hours is going to make no difference.
It blows up in your face, it's too late.
Well, and the parties have been conscious of this for the last decade, because if you look at the campaign rhythm, it's really very much geared to build up and come to a crescendo around the landing of the postal votes. So, and then the final week is just about the final getting out the vote.
But then I thought the timing of the final TV debate then didn't particularly suit. I mean, postal voting is something more associated with older voters. Older voters are more closely associated with being supporters of the Tories, or perhaps even Reform in this case, than Labour, perhaps, because it's more of a younger vote, Stephen. And therefore, if there is a problem with these votes, the Conservatives are going to be more badly affected potentially than perhaps Labour.
Probably, but it does vary. It depends on the constituency. I mean, I think the important thing to note is if people have received their postal vote late, and it's too late to return it and send it back, they can still take that postal vote into a polling station.
Yes,
and I think what all of the parties...
Give it to the returning officer there.
It's an old art that's forgotten, but all of the parties locally will say to people that they will help get them to the polling station, give them a lift if they need to.
Okay.
All campaigns, offer that service.
Put on buses.
Well, no, it's back in the day when we poor Labour people, we didn't have cars, So,
had to walk for miles to polling station, Stephen. Yes,
the Tories would swan through in their Bentleys.
All right. Come on now. Let's get into the politics of today then. Is it wise, George, for Rishi Sunak to be saying, quotes, a hung parliament is in our grasp? Has he completely given up on winning this thing? Why is he now managing expectations towards a hung parliament?
I think what you've got to bear in mind, we are in the what parties will call the get out the vote stage, the GOTV phase of this campaign. And the time for making new arguments is gone. And it's all about trying to get people who would normally be supportive of you to actually turn out and vote for you and not to drift and be disloyal and go to other parties because they're a bit annoyed by you. And really what Rishi Sunak's doing, I think, is recognising the polls are what they are. We've been plagued throughout this election with people saying, oh, it's a foregone conclusion, Blair's, the Labour are going to win and Starmer's going to win. Well, he's in the background, isn't he? Starmer's going to win and the Conservatives have got no hope. That's been in the ether. He's sort of recognising that, but trying to get people who might have drifted to reform to come back. And the best argument he's got at the moment is don't give them a blank check.
I'm sorry, I think it's still a despair. I mean, in all honesty, what he should be saying...
Well, Starmer's saying it's bordering on hysteria, particularly this row about him suggesting he's going to clock off at 6 p.m. on Friday.
I know. I think it's marvellous. Keir Starmer is saying that 6 o'clock on Friday is family time. I mean, I respect that.
Yes. I mean, it's been slightly...
Good luck getting it, because, I mean, if you're Prime Minister...
Is it a bit naive? We all appreciate that. Everybody wants family time. I mean, we can all agree with that on this panel. I include Dr Carter in that, because he's a busy doctor. But at the same time, is it the right thing to be saying as you're approaching Downing Street and going to be handed the keys to number 10? We want to look as if you're completely...
Maybe this is expectation management as well.
Look, he was a civil servant in a previous life. He's not actually had ministerial experience. And so, if he thinks he can do that, he's in for a bit of a rude awakening.
He doesn't know what's in that red box.
I'm not sure he knows what's going to... It does worry me that he's not quite sure what's going to hit him and what the job entails, because it won't be easy for him to just, take Fridays off.
And let's also have a final word about reform. So we've had another defection to the Tories. Georgie David has said that she's frustrated and dismayed by Nigel Farage's failure to tackle issues with candidates. But Chairman Richard Tice has suggested on X, formerly known as Twitter, that reform has fallen victim to Tory Trojan horses. Quick word on that.
I don't see that. I mean, there's certainly this Andrew Parker business, this professional actor who ends up effing and blinding on the doorstep. I mean, there's a whiff about that one, I have to say. But this with Georgia, I mean, I don't know, what did she think she was signing up for in Beckton, where she was, standing as a... And she actually talked, the place is full of misogynists and so on as well. I'm sorry, why would you do it now, at the time it can do the maximum damage? Why would you endorse a Conservative?
It might be a sign, though, just to wrap up, because we're running out of time, George, that there are shy Conservatives out there who have flirted with the idea of reform but changed their minds. I mean, this is a candidate, but could that be reflected in the electorate?
Both of these candidates, they're quite young, and they probably thought that they were, supporting a party that was closest to them, and then they realise that they are surrounded by a lot of other, candidates whose views they find abhorrent, and they, they're basically reacting to that. And so the idea that the Conservative Party's inserted some sort of Trojan horse is clearly ridiculous. I'm not sure we're capable of running that kind of operation.
I'll tell you what, that would really be sophisticated.
But it's much more straightforward. These are young candidates who had ideals, and they've gone in there and it's not what they thought.
All right, chaps, see you on election night. We'll have matchsticks in our eyes, be drinking Red Bull by the gallon. Right, coming up next, we're going to be...
placement again.
Well, no, other energy drinks are available, folks. Coming up next, we're going to be discussing why Ed Sheeran, of all people, thinks that London is lawless. Don't go anywhere.
Good evening. I'm here with your GB News weather forecast, brought to you by the Met Office. It's not feeling all that much like July at the moment. Yes, there has been some sunshine around today, but temperatures have actually been around or a little bit below average for the time of year, and it is going to turn increasingly cloudy and wet as we go through tonight because of a system that's pushing its way southwards. Yes, there may be some clear skies to start the night in the south, but here it's going to turn very cloudy, and everywhere we are going to see a lot of cloud and then that rain pushing pushing its way in. Some of that rain heavy across some parts of northern England. The cloud, the rain, and for some of us, some blustery winds means temperatures are going to stay up, most places holding up in double figures. Bit of a soggy start then for many of us tomorrow morning. There could still be some heavy bursts of rain around, though most of that is going to clear away towards the east quite quickly. And in fact, by the time we get to 7 o'clock in the morning, across some central southern parts of England, there could be some drier, brighter weather around. A bit cloudier further north across other parts of England and Wales. And in fact, across parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, we're going to see another band of rain pushing its way in. This rain could be quite persistent, though not especially heavy. A little bit drier first thing across eastern parts of Scotland, perhaps northeast England, but this band affecting western Scotland and Northern Ireland is gradually going to make its way east and southeastwards as we go through the day. So more places over northern England, Wales, southwest England, perhaps turning damp again as we go through the afternoon. Elsewhere, there will be some drier weather around, cloudier towards the east, brighter skies towards the northwest with some showers mixed in, and temperatures still a little bit below average for the time of year, just about getting to the low 20s. On Thursday, there's going to be a bit of a north-south split. In the north, we can expect some blustery winds and some fairly frequent showers. Some of these could be on the heavy side. Further south, though, across many central southern parts of England and Wales, it's actually looking largely dry and lighter winds here too, with plenty of sunshine. By Friday, though, more of us are likely to see some wet and windy weather. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage. And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News.
Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Vote 2024 with me, Camilla Tominey. Now, the singer and musician Ed Sheeran has given an interview where he suggested that London is becoming increasingly lawless. In an interview with American stand-up comedian Theo Von, the Shape of You singer made the following remarks.
It's the most dangerous place to be around here.
Here? I'd say every area of London, literally every area, is sketchy.
I love that.
The nice areas are sketchy, the bad areas are sketchy, but you just have to not do stupid. Like, if you wander around with, I don't know, like a Louis Vuitton duffel bag and a 200 grand watch, you are going to get robbed. But just don't do that.
Just don't do that. Well, former Met Police Detective Peter Blexley joins me in the studio now. Peter, lovely to see you.
Thank you.
He's not wrong, is he? I mean, would anyone go around with a 200 grand watch on and a duffel bag? Maybe it was ever thus. But it does strike us that the capital is becoming increasingly lawless.
It sickens me to the very pit of my stomach to say that Ed Sheeran is right. I want anybody who's been successful and can afford a luxury watch and a nice bag to be able to walk around our great city without fear of being robbed. But sadly, the crime statistics show that there are increasing numbers of violent crime in the city. There's a huge amount of fraud, which is not necessarily violent, but there are other serious crimes against women and girls. And so the very unpalatable beat of increasing crime goes on.
Has it changed in recent years, Peter? Because this whole Rolex gang theft thing seems to be a bit more of a more modern phenomena. I mean, I think 20 years ago, if you were lucky enough to be able to afford a luxury watch, you could probably wear it around Oxford Circus and Bond Street and be feeling relatively safe. That's no longer the case.
And 20 years ago, you might have dined in Mayfair, for example. And the actual truth of the matter was some of the more better-to-do areas were policed better by the Metropolitan Police than others. Officers would particularly be put in places where there was great wealth. Politicians, the wealthy lived because they wanted to be kept protected, and the police wanted to do that. Now, unfortunately, the truth of the matter is so much crime is unreported.
Yes.
And this is really kind of the elephant in the room. There are so many people who I speak to on a daily basis who are victims of crime or who are related or are friends with people who have recently become victims of crime in our great city. And when I say to them in a pleading tone, did you report this to the police? The answer inevitably is, what's the point?
Well, that's a terrible indictment. I mean, to what extent do we blame the police themselves? To what extent do we blame government? You know, Theresa May cut police numbers famously. I was speaking to a former Met copper a couple of weeks ago for a story on The Telegraph, and he was reminding me of just how many police stations in central London have been closed down.
600 throughout the nation. And the Met was no exception. Absolutely ludicrous. But really, the essence of the collapse of the policing model as it used to be, and I'll accept it's never been perfect. Policing's full of people, so it'll never be perfect. But in many regards, in relation to keeping the public safer, having a better relation with the public, it was that 20, 30 years ago. The downfall of policing was when the academics took over. And
explain that a bit, Peter.
Well, so in 1997, Tony Blair said education, 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 and many senior police officers said, we'll have a piece of this, and off they trotted to their red brick universities. Some of them were funded entirely, and of course they began the generation of police officers with letters after their names instead of in front.
But what do you mean, that academisation, so to speak, of the police force has resulted in fewer practical skills? Because there's a problem at the other end of the scale, isn't there, that quite a few people are becoming police officers now that can't read and write.
Senior police officers these days are loaded with degrees and MBAs and the such like, and there are departments of policing in many universities. We have professors of policing. Academia is everywhere in policing, and if you want to get promoted through the ranks, you have to be an academic, whereas practical policing, people who have worked their way steadily through the ranks, gaining experience of frontline, supervision, management, controlling operations, they will be bypassed because they simply do not have the necessary academic qualifications. Academia is everywhere in policing, and it's never been in a worse state.
Finally, Peter, I mean, is there this kind of atmosphere building up where criminals have a licence to thieve because of these sort of strange rules around not necessarily prosecuting or criminalising people for lifting less than £200 worth of goods from shops? Sort of seems to be suggesting to criminals that they can get away with it.
And they do on a daily basis. Not only do they get away with shoplifting completely unimpinged, but 800 members of retail staff get assaulted every single day of the week. The streets are increasingly lawless. Policing is in chaos. It's a shame on all the houses that more of crime and policing was not made during this general election campaign.
It's hardly been mentioned at all.
But the minute it's over, 5th, 6th of July, when we go back to thousands of victims of serious crime every day of the week, it'll be back on the front pages.
Peter Bleksley, thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. Well, let's go over to Chalfont St Giles in leafy Buckinghamshire now, where villagers have been kicking up a stink over a stench that has forced them to withdraw from the Best Kept Village competition. The parish council made the decision to pull out after Thames Water dumped raw sewage into the River Misbourne. Joining me to discuss this is Chalfont St Giles councillor Karen Dixon. Karen, this is near me in my neck of the woods because I live on the Herts-Bucks border, so I'm very familiar with Chalfont St Giles. How badly does it smell?
It has been really, really difficult from them. I'm not a parish councillor from St Giles. I'm a parish councillor from the village just next door, and I think our neighbours are having a torrid time. It's affecting the centre of their village, their library. It's coming in through windows. So it's very unpleasant.
Coming in through windows? What do you mean? The stench?
The smell is just coming in through windows. So they're having a torrid time.
And what have you said to Thames Water about it? Because clearly this situation can't go on. We've had problems, haven't we, in recent months and years about sewage. I know about the issues locally. We used to take our children to paddle down near us in some of the rivers around the Chilterns. We can't do that anymore because they're not safe. We've had all sorts of different disease outbreaks. We've got talk now that, you know, rowers can't go into the Thames because it's so dirty. What's the water company saying in response to complaints?
I think the water companies are constantly saying that it's just groundwater. They're saying it's excess groundwater. It's the most rain we've had in so many years. It's the wettest February we've had in 28 years. But I think residents are feeling that it doesn't matter so much about the rainwater. We can cope with an excess of rainwater. It's the sewage that comes up from the systems. That's what's made things unbearable. It was embarrassing when the boat race, when people were complaining during the boat race, the Oxford-Cambridge boat race about the smell. It's Marlow, it's all the areas along here. And I think Thames Water keeps saying, oh, they're doing their utmost, but residences, businesses are struggling.
And Karen, you're a local politician, so you're obviously in contact with constituents all the time. Do you think this sewage issue is actually going to be a big factor in how people vote on Thursday?
It's a good question. I must point out that I'm not a political candidate. I'm just a volunteer parish councillor, so I'm an independent here. I do think it will have massive implications because people are seeing it on their front doorsteps. They're seeing it in their back gardens. It's affecting their Saturdays and Sundays. It's affecting how they do recreation. It's affecting how their businesses run. I think it'll be a really big issue. I don't know whoever is still in charge on Friday. I don't know how they're going to fix it, but somebody needs to fix it and somebody needs to hold the water companies to account.
All right, Karen Dixon, thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. Well, we're going to be talking about the election coming up with Professor Sir John Curtis, the polling guru who's going to take us through the very latest numbers. Don't go anywhere.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Prince Harry obviously set up the Invictus Games in collaboration with Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, as part of their royal foundation, but Prince Harry took it under his wing separately. And last month he celebrated the 10th anniversary back in London. It's Invictus Games is an Olympic-style competition to help wounded veterans from various different countries with their rehabilitation through the power of sport. And that's what he's being honoured for. The reason he's got it is because of the positive impact, and I quote, on veteran communities through the power of sports. Pat Tillman, what the award is named after, he was a US war veteran. He was killed in Afghanistan in 2004. Prince Harry, of course, served 2 tours himself. Whether he deserves it, Martin, to answer your question, clearly the judges think that that is the case. Of course, I think what we're seeing from Prince Harry over the last couple of months is him really focusing on his passion, which is helping veterans and helping families of veterans, rather than what we've seen over the last few years, which is him talking about himself and complaining about his life as a working member of the royal family.
Now, Cameron, nobody can deny the importance of the Invictus Games. What an amazing achievement. Perhaps Prince Harry's finest achievement in terms of public relations.
Having someone like Prince Harry or another working member of the royal family with their fame can spotlight very worthy causes, such as the plight of veterans and those who feel like they've been left behind and do not have enough support when they come out of the British Armed Forces. And that's something, as you alluded to, Martin, that Prince Harry perhaps arguably has done very successfully over the last decade. And if Prince Harry's name wasn't on the Invictus Games, would it have done so well? That's probably the arguments they'd make. But as you say, not everyone's happy about the fact that Prince Harry's involved, but he is. Clearly, many people think he deserves it because he's getting this award in Los Angeles.
GB News, the People's Channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
Welcome to Vote 2024 with me, Camilla Tominey. Professor Sir John Curtis, pollster and Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde, joins me now to discuss the latest numbers. Professor, lovely to see you. You've been saying today that there's more chance of lightning striking twice than a Tory victory for Rishi Sunak. Is that definitely right? No? Qualify that then. Right. What did you actually say? Go on.
Right. It's really a repetition of what I've said before about there being a 99% chance of Keir Starmer being the next Prime Minister. So what I was saying is that lightning would have to strike twice for Mr Sunak to retain the position of Prime Minister, which is not quite the same thing as saying Labour would need to win the election, because you have to bear in mind that even if we were to get a dramatic closure in the polls, and as a result the Conservative Party ends up being the larger party in a hung parliament, that would still not ensure that Mr Sunak was Prime Minister because of the lack of potential coalition allies. You've got to put the two things together.
Fair enough. What is the chance at the moment of a hung parliament? None of the polls seem to be pointing to that at all.
No. I mean that in itself is extremely remote. So at the moment, if you're just taking the consequence of the most recent regular poll, 19-point Labour lead. The worst error in the polls is about historically is about 9 points. Add to that what would now, with what would constitute a pretty dramatic narrowing of the polls for just the last couple of days. Let's take another 4 off that lead. Well, we're still looking at a 6-point Labour lead. That would potentially put us into hung parliament territory. But I'm now taking 2 very, very strong assumptions. But even with only a 6-point Labour lead, Mr Sunak does not remain Prime Minister because he will not be doing well enough to be able to get past the 326 mark, which effectively the Conservatives have to do. Labour don't.
Okay. And when we're...
all of that said, I mean, there's the first of what will doubtless be a forest of these so-called MRP mega polls from Sewage. They're saying it's over a 90% chance that Labour will get more than they did under Tony Blair in 1997. And the Conservatives are being hard-pressed by Liberal Democrats to remain the second largest party. So that's arguably another forecast at the other end of the spectrum.
I mean, these MRP polls, are they to be believed, John? Are they to be taken with a pinch of salt? We've had some predicting just 50 seats for the Conservatives, others predicting more than 150, which seems to me to be a wide variance. What should the public make of it all?
Well, actually, the highest is 155, not much more than that. The truth is they should be taken notice of, but not necessarily all of them believed. There is a crucial similarity between them, and then there is an underlying difference. The crucial similarity, and it's the reason why all of them are pointing to the Conservatives heading for a pretty low number of seats, is that they're all finding that the Conservative vote is falling most heavily in places where they were previously strongest. Yes. That is a pattern that is arithmetically partly inevitable because the scale of the Conservative loss is such that there's about 100 constituencies where they cannot lose by as much as the national polls are pointing to. It's also because the Brexit Party did not fight Conservative constituencies in 2019. So anything that reform getting Conservative-held constituencies is going to be a plus on 0. What they disagree about, however, is the extent to which the Conservative support will fall more heavily in the places where they were previously strongest. And I think this is, in fact, the biggest uncertainty about the election. So you're right, it could be between 50 and 150. We don't know where it will lie within that range, but that does look like the range within which it is likely to lie. And any figure within that range would represent the worst Conservative result in its history.
Could shy conservatism have been underestimated in the vein of 1992, Professor? I mean, could it be higher than...
1992 was not caused by shy stories. 1992, like 2015, was caused by the much boring explanation, which is that there were simply too many Labour voters in the polls. That said, what is true is, and it's still true, that about 9% or so of 2019 Conservative voters are saying that they're undecided. That number does now seem to be falling, as we would expect, as we're getting towards polling day, but it's still twice the proportion of 2019 Labour voters are saying they're undecided. Now, even if you assume that all of those 2019 Conservative voters actually go back to the Conservatives, but then make the same assumption for Labour, you're only going to knock about 3 or 4 points off the Labour lead at most. So, yes, one of the reasons why in the end the polls might somewhat overestimate the Labour position is because of the undecideds, which you might want to call shy Tories.
Yes.
But it's not enough to change the big headline, which is the Conservatives are a very long way behind.
And what's your prediction for kind of the big theme of the night? Obviously, we've already seen all of the polling which suggests that a Labour government is almost an inevitability. The scale of the Tory defeat, we don't quite know it yet, but we think it's going to be very large. Is it going to be the falling of these big Tory beasts? Is that going to be the story of the night, successive Portillo moments?
Yes, I think it's going to be exactly like 1997. I mean, if indeed the polls are at all right, we are going to see a number of cabinet ministers lose their seats. And I guess the seat that, if it were to go, that would be the nearest equivalent to 1997 would be Penny Mordaunt, because Penny Mordaunt is probably at the moment the lead centrist candidate for the Conservative leadership contest that will probably ensue after this election, in much the same way as Michael Portillo occupied a similar position back in 1997. That will, that's the one big beast who we might anticipate will stand, who is most clearly at risk.
All right, Professor Sir John Curtis, thank you very much indeed for your experience and wisdom this evening. Lovely to speak to you. I mentioned earlier Chalfont St Giles. Let's just read out the candidates for that area. Chris Chilton is standing for the Labour Party, Gareth David Williams for the Conservatives, Julian David Foster for the Heritage Party, Justin Collect McPherson Fulford for the Green Party, Sarah Green for the Liberal Democrats, Lawrence Jarvis for Reform UK, Mohammed Pervez Khan for the Workers' Party of Britain. And that constituency in which Chalfont St Giles is included is Chesham and Amersham. Coming up next is State of the Nation with Tom Harwood. Tom, what are you going to get into this evening?
Well, we're going to be talking to Stephen Timms of the Labour Party on what is expected to be a super-duper, perhaps what on earth am I trying to say? Fragilisticexpialidocious majority, according to these latest polls. But we're also going to be looking at postal votes. Yes. The UK is only one of 7 countries around the world, 7 major countries, where you can get a postal vote on demand. Every other country attaches some qualification. You have to be infirm, you have to be disabled, you have to be away for some reason. Do we have far too liberal a system of postal voting in this country? And is that causing some of the problems? Too many people having postal votes that don't need them? And is that causing some of the problems with delivery? We'll be getting into that discussion as well. But that's not all. We've got a GB News exclusive on that Channel 4 sting into Reform UK. What exactly did they ask those activists?
Oh, wonderful. Well, stay tuned for that. I'm going to be back tomorrow at 7 p.m, but up next is the weather with Alex Burkill.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. I'm here with your GB News weather forecast, brought to you by the Met Office. It's not feeling all that much like July at the moment. Yes, there has been some sunshine around today, but temperatures have actually been around or a little bit below average for the time of year, and it is going to turn increasingly cloudy and wet as we go through tonight because of a system that's pushing its way southwards. Yes, there may be some clear skies to start the night in the south, but here it's going to turn very cloudy, and everywhere we are going to see a lot of cloud and then that rain pushing its way in. Some of that rain heavy across some parts of northern England. The cloud, the rain, and for some of us some blustery winds means temperatures are going to stay up, most places holding up in double figures. Bit of a soggy start then for many of us tomorrow morning. There could still be some heavy bursts of rain around, though most of that is going to clear away towards the east quite quickly. And in fact, by the time we get to 7 o'clock in the morning, across some central southern parts of England, there could be some drier, brighter weather around. A bit cloudier further north across other parts of England and Wales. And in fact, across parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, we're going to see another band of rain pushing its way in. This rain could be quite persistent, though not especially heavy. A little bit drier first thing across eastern parts of Scotland, perhaps northeast England, but this band affecting western Scotland and Northern Ireland is gradually going to make its way east and southeastwards as we go through the day. So more places over northern England, Wales, southwest England, perhaps turning damp again as we go through the afternoon. Elsewhere, there will be some drier weather around, cloudier towards the east, brighter skies towards the northwest with some showers mixed in, and temperatures still a little bit below average for the time of year, just about getting to the low 20s. On Thursday, there's going to be a bit of a north-south split. In the north, we can expect some blustery winds and some fairly frequent showers. Some of these could be on the heavy side. Further south, though, across many central southern parts of England and Wales, it's actually looking largely dry and lighter winds here too, with plenty of sunshine. By Friday, though, more of us are likely to see some wet and windy weather. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
You're joking. Really? Seriously? It's not a line, what is it?
Oh, slipping neck. Oh, dear.
Oh, my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. Like I said, I've never won anything like this.
That is absolutely fantastic. Over the moon. Thank you.
For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frothy in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News.
Britain's election channel. I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Tom Harwood, bringing you State of the Nation. Tonight, fears have risen that thousands of postal votes across 90-plus constituencies may not arrive in time. The government blames the Royal Mail and the Royal Mail blames the government. But will thousands of postal voters be disenfranchised? And Is the postal voting system now simply too big? Find out shortly. Meanwhile, Reform UK has suffered yet another candidate backing the Tories, this time claiming the majority of the party's candidates are racist, misogynistic and bigoted. Now, Labour's migrants plan has faced criticism for not being particularly different to what is being pursued already, save for the fact they intend to scrap the planned Rwanda deportations. Plus, the Reform Channel 4 racism row plot thickens with a GB News exclusive that suggests there was more to the investigation than meets the eye. State of the